There's a new threat to Western economic powers, and it comes in the form of BRICS. This group of countries is rapidly expanding, and its new members offer massive financial clout when it comes to global influence. The G7 is understandably wary of this ever-growing group, and they have every right to be. For years now, the potential has been there with these alternative nations, but now it's starting to be realized. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa were thought to be nations full of potential, but there were always question marks over whether they were capable of achieving it. Back in the 1960s, General Charles de Gaulle joked about Brazil's economy. Brazil is the country of the future and always will be. He was talking about those countries that seem to have all the resources and ingredients for success, but still repeatedly fail through inadequate leadership, unsound policies, or weak institutions to translate that potential into real performance. That was then, and this is now. BRIC was a term formed at the turn of the millennium and represented those nations with a similar kind of potential. Since then, South Africa has joined to complete the BRICS acronym, and the countries have formally started working together to further the economies of everyone in that group. Although historically the group haven't been the best at mobilizing or formally exploiting their union, this has changed in recent years and has led to the introduction of 6 key members: Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. They joined BRICS at the start of January, and this now means the group are a big player worthy of mounting an economic power bloc challenge to the likes of that other influential group, the G7. As of 2023, over 3.3 billion people lived in BRICS countries, 42% of the world's population, including the world's 2 most populous countries, India and China. Additionally, the 4 original BRIC countries are among the 7 largest by area and help to make up the 12 largest economies in the world alongside South Korea and the G7 states. South Africa is the outlier here, ranking outside the top 40 economies in the world. However, its position as the most stable and advanced economy in sub-Saharan Africa means it holds a very important position within its continent. The one thing that holds the original 5 BRICS states back is their differing opinions across many areas, such as demographic development, political ideology, and access to resources. However, most importantly, they share a common goal in their pursuit of economic growth. This diversity within their nations might not be such a bad thing, where Chinese manufacturing, Russian energy, or Brazilian commodities make the BRICS key players in many international markets. Before the addition of the new nations, the gross domestic product, or the value of the goods and services produced by the 5 countries combined, accounted for about 23% of the world's GDP. Now, with 6 new countries joining, they have more influence than ever. The first BRIC term was initially created by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill in 2001. He believed that by 2050, the 4 BRIC economies would come to dominate the global economy. South Africa was added to the list in 2010 to create the first group of BRICS nations. The reason these nations were so promising was that they had low labour costs, favourable demographics, and abundant natural resources at a time of a global commodities boom. However, when the acronym was first coined, it didn't seem that viable. Even though the investment banking firm believed that these countries had the potential to form a powerful economic bloc, it was dependent on significant policy assumptions. But it was still thought that economic power would bring political power, and indeed leaders from BRICS countries regularly attended summits together and often acted with each other's interests. The group exists as an informal confederation of nations that meets every year at the BRICS convention. There, members and heads of state seek to build economic cooperation between the nations. This is despite the fact that its members disagree on fundamental factors such as transparency and a balanced approach, which has always slowed down the group. The head of state of a member nation acts as the chairman of the group, rotating once a year. Informal meetings began in 2006, but the group's first official meeting was in 2009 in Russia. Because of their economic power and the appeal of disentangling from the West to a degree, BRICS has claimed that over 40 countries want to join the group. It announced that it invited additional countries to join the group at its 2023 summit. It was then reported that full membership would be granted to Argentina, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates at the start of 2024. Analysts have been right to highlight the inclusion of Saudi Arabia and Iran, 2 of the largest oil producers in the world after the United States, particularly Saudi Arabia. Estimations suggest that after the expansion, the gross domestic product of the BRICS Plus countries could rise as high as 37% of the world's GDP. And as for demographics, the member countries will account for almost half of the planet's population at 47%. In contrast, the G7's member countries only represent around 10% of the world's population, and their weight in the world economy is decreasing. The G7 is the group of nations that BRICS is very aware of, and is made up of 7 democratic industrialized countries: Germany, Canada, the United States, France, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom, plus the European Union as a permanent guest, an 8th member since 1981. They might not account for much of the population, but they account for 45% of the world's gross income. But the weight of the G7 countries in the world economy is decreasing, after previously having 75% of the world's gross income. The International Monetary Fund has estimated that the BRICS countries will collectively have a GDP of $57 trillion, while the G7 nations are projected to have a GDP of $4 trillion less. The leaders of BRICS nations have come out firing and have made it very clear that their stance is to oppose the G7. The president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, has criticised the Western group for treating itself as an exclusive club. Meanwhile, leader of China, Xi Jinping, has condemned countries obsessed with maintaining their hegemony, going out of their way to cripple emerging markets and developing countries. Western nations have responded by criticising other BRICS nations for risking the fate of being satellites around China. They argue that the prosperity seen by China hasn't materialised for other nations, and that rivalries are still present between emerging economies, particularly India and China. Russia and China might seem to have a good relationship, but while China has given Putin diplomatic cover over the invasion of Ukraine, Beijing is in effect charging for it by buying Russian oil below world market price. And it's Ukraine that provides the biggest barrier to any real progression with the BRICS nations. The organisation of 2023's BRICS summit in South Africa sparked a number of tensions due to the possible attendance of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who in the end couldn't attend, being under an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court for the war. As a member of the court, South Africa would have been forced to arrest him upon entering the country. Also, it's telling that in March of that year, a special session was held in the United Nations General Assembly to approve the resolution condemning the invasion of Ukraine. The resolution was approved with the favourable vote of 141 countries of the 193 member states. However, 35 countries abstained, including China, India and South Africa, members of the BRICS bloc. But Brazil voted in favour of the resolution. But then again, the members have made it very clear that their political differences won't get in the way of their potential economic prosperity. So what does the future hold? The person who coined the BRIC term in the first place, Jim O'Neill, posed the question: what would an expanded BRICS mean? There are 4 key things that he thinks will happen. Firstly, the symbolic power of the BRICS will grow. Next, the US and China will dominate their respective groups even more than they have done previously. Thirdly, the world needs a revitalised G20, which includes the same key world leaders plus others as the best forum for addressing truly global issues. And finally, the BRICS group could be more effective if key members had shared goals. Is it even possible in the current climate to salvage the G20 to include both the United States and China? Or are we fast approaching a new world order of polarising states, the G7 and BRICS? Then there's the real possibility that some or all BRICS nations do end up becoming satellites of China, according to the Western prophecy. Surrendering their autonomy would definitely be a high price to pay. For more videos on the most important topics from the world of economics, please subscribe to Trees Economy. Thanks for watching.